I built a 360-degree orbiting virtual production studio from a marble orbit and the biggest Sony BRAVIA LED TV I could find. There's no way this is going to work. There's no way this is... Oh, it worked.
So Sony challenged me to use their new BRAVIA television in my filmmaking process. I'm doing exactly that. As a disclaimer, you're definitely not allowed to put this much weight on the orbit, ever. Under any circumstances, definitely do not.
This is orbit. This is what it looks like normally. You mount it to your ceiling and it makes over-the-top, super cinematic circles. And this is what it looks like when you attach an extra large Sony BRAVIA LED TV to the other end of it and play back virtual production plates with the same exact rotational speed as the camera. Now, this episode is sponsored by Sony. They were crazy enough to send me this TV for this experiment, despite my numerous disclaimers of the extreme likelihood I would break it.
Woo! We didn't break it. I am vlogging right now on a massive television, the 98-inch Sony BRAVIA TV. I don't even need a key light. It's lighting up my face as much as I would normally use. This is my new setup here. I wouldn't change anything about this. Yeah, you got a monster there?
Hell is this, 85?
98.
98!
But who's measuring? The pitfalls of having a ridiculously large television. Nobody ever talks about this one.
It's 150 pounds, boys. We can muscle it. Mine on landing.
Now, because Sony sponsored this video, I want to be clear, this video is not how great this television is. I don't care if you buy it. This video is doing something that I've been meaning to do with the Orbit for a very long time.
The packaging is really nice. Now, why does a $7,000 television cost $7,000? Woo!
On first glance of the specs and ports, this is a pretty standard 4K TV. It's a full array LED, so it's one of the brighter televisions you can buy, which is clutch for virtual production stuff. It has 4 HDMI ports, the bottom 2 of which, ports 3 and 4, are HDMI 2.1, which support refresh rates up to 120 Hertz, which is definitely necessary for virtual production.
The beauty about this one is it can work this way or this way.
Particularly the 120 Hertz refresh rate. More on that later.
How do you lift a 150-pound television when you have no friends like me?
But the real power of the X90L class BRAVIA television is what's behind the display. One notable feature is the built-in tweeter arrangement that makes sounds seem like they're coming straight from the center of the television. Now, Sony Legal wants me to disclose this is a gross exaggeration, but you get the idea.
So this is my normal 2-cam setup. My Sony FX3, and then I have an A7S III up here. And normally I have a television just right behind this. But this television is so big, I have it pressed all the way against the wall over there. You can clearly see if I'm in focus or if I'm not in focus from all the way here. Isn't that wild? That's 40 feet away. That is a massive television. Any location in this room when I'm filming, I could just like be doing my thing. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in focus. It's great, perfect. Behold, virtual production set.
So before I string this television up on my Orbit rig, I wanted to see how good the graphics would be with Unreal Engine 5.4 on a low stakes shoot, i.e. nothing that might kill me.
You're gonna hear the fan on this thing kick on really hard. I know very little about what we're doing here. I know just enough that it works and they finally made it easy.
This is a lie. Nothing on Unreal Engine is easy. Since the last time I did anything with Unreal Engine was about 2 years ago using 4.3's graphics, and well, it's come a long way since then. The main thing I wanted to test is how the graphics look with Sony BRAVIA's full array local dimming. This basically means the bright areas of the image can get brighter without washing out or muddying the dark region. And the other thing I wanted to test was Unreal Engine's new ability to wirelessly tether with the iPhone 15 Pro or iPhone 16 using only Wi-Fi connection. You could, in theory, build a wireless virtual production camera sync that's attached to your main camera and bypass a ton of the hardware like pucks or tracking and such. This is in theory. In actuality, it barely works. The latency is too great to make any movements realistic.
Long story short, out of all of this, the television is performing flawlessly. Everything else,
Now, not to be one to give up early, I wanted one more test just to see how far the graphics have come in Unreal Engine, at the very least, with a locked off camera.
It needs something else. It needs something in the center. How do we do on width? Oh, I think this will just work. There we go. I was about to throw this thing away. It's been outside on my balcony for like 6 months, and I was like, I can't throw it away. It's useful. All right, let's try this again. We moved it up just a little bit. Let me see if I can position us a little bit better. I got these nanlite tubes up here, just bouncing just a little bit of light right here. That's all you need. Cue the dramatic voiceover, sound effects.
Journal entry 25. Another rainy day. The city that never sleeps. My days are starting to blend together. If I have ramen one more time, I'm gonna have explosive diarrhea.
I'm looking at the street. That doesn't make sense. I need to be looking down. I wish I could get the tracking thing to work better, but static shots, lighting, it's almost there. Like if you can see, there's textures coming down of water dripping and there's like sparks flashing in the background. It's like so close. I want this to work so bad. And I feel like it's still another 2 or 3 years away from this being in everyone's YouTube studio. Watch the ceiling.
Okay, we're gonna go up.
We're going up that way. Oh.
Now, given the fact that there's an extreme likelihood that I break this television doing the orbit, there's a few key setups that I want to try first, starting with solving a problem in our house.
So my wife wants to knock out the living room to kitchen wall. And I got a quote from Greater Dayton Construction Company. They wanted 12 grand. I was like, dude, I'll just buy this $7,000 television and I'll save myself like 5 grand.
So at current recording of this video, the TV is on a deep discount for $5,000, which is still an expensive television and prices itself in the higher end of the market when compared to others of the same size. But there are a few specific reasons why this TV has been lauded by many reviewers and is better suited for this project than the cheaper alternatives.
Perfect.
And for this episode, it's the overall color accuracy and peak lumens.
It's like looking through the wall. Charles, it's like I'm looking right at you, bro. Arthur, do you want to see the hole in the wall Daddy made?
Yeah.
All right, Arthur. Look at that. There's Charles. You want to try it? I see you. All right, let's get the wife. Construction crew is done. We knocked a hole out in the wall. Ready to take a look at it? Your new open floor plan.
No. Oh my gosh. This is hilarious.
You wanted. You wanted the open floor plan. You're welcome.
But I need to be able to see through from the kitchen into the living room while the kids are playing and I'm cooking.
Thanks for coming over, Elliot. Where's this going? Yeah, go down that way. Okay. Bro, I watched Maverick on this the other day. Top Gun.
Really?
Holy
Someone got around to seeing that.
Oh my God. It was shot on the Sony Venice. The idea of watching a movie shot on a Sony camera that's also then playing back. I farted again. I'm sorry,
Where do you
bro.
want to put it?
Sorry, bro. I had beans for breakfast.
Beans
I
for
apologize.
breakfast? Who eats beans for breakfast? British?
Bro, you don't have Mexican food for breakfast ever? Breakfast burrito?
Dude, come on.
I'm sorry. I cleared you out with that last one, bro.
That's all right.
You can take a breather if you need.
No, it's
Okay, watch your footing. All right, anywhere. Oh.
I'm glad I'm over here.
So the first thing to think about with a television this big is, where do you put it?
Don't ask why I have an electric winch. Just know I got one.
I initially bought this because I wanted to build an elevator out of my last studio, and I can't tell you how stoked I am that I'm finally putting it to good use. This electric hoist is rated 1,740 pounds, which basically means these screws will be ripped out of the wall before this winch fails, which is good because I estimate we'll probably need about 300. Now this television has a lot of real estate, and I've always wanted to see what it's like editing on a screen this big. But sitting this TV on a desk would only block my studio. So this is my more creative workaround. This winch will also double as my way in which to safely lift the TV onto the orbit for the last test.
I feel like I just gotta commit, huh? It's all the way over here, so I can't, like... Oh.
Now, having an electric hoist inside your studio is very useful. That is, as long as the control box is long enough. So it looks like we'll have to make an extension. Introducing my 25-foot control box.
Look at this, baby!
So now I can stand anywhere I want in the studio and lift whatever I want.
I mean, it's not a bad angle. The problem is this television is front heavy. So if I wanted to lift it up, it's like slightly leaning forward. I got an idea.
So the second part of what I have planned is building a bracket to hold this television. The 98-inch TV has 4 10mm wall mount threads on the back, so a simple, flat, extra large wall mount will work. I went with the cheapest one because I plan on heavily modifying it. Cue the Sony FX3 slow-mo anamorphic welding montage. Now, most everything that I shoot for the channel is currently shot with the FX3 or the Sony a7S III, so I'm excited to see what my footage looks like being played back on a massive Sony-made television. Now, Sony prides itself on being one of the few manufacturers, if not the only camera and television manufacturer with a deep understanding of sensor-to-screen pipeline, meaning these colors I'm seeing here should be recorded and played back with the same fidelity, nothing lost in translation. Now, this doesn't seem all that important for normal stuff, but it will come in very handy later when we film plates with the Sony camera, and then we play them back on the Sony television and have them match in real time. So the frame is pretty strong, but looks like we're missing one key element, the top part. And this is where I'd like to introduce the power of triangles. This is a pretty thin piece of sheet metal, so we'll have to double it up. If you're a fan of this John Wick lighting, just know I'm a much better cinematographer than I am welder.
God, that looks like sh**.
Now, the third part of the equation is power. The 98-inch Sony BRAVIA television will consume approximately 150 watts per hour, depending on what's on screen. So the DJI PowerStation 1000 will get us about 7 hours, give or take. That's plenty of record screen time. And at 29.2 pounds, it's a perfect solution to counterbalance the front tilting TV. Well, almost perfect. I'm repurposing a microphone stand presenter tray that we can make a shelf for my MacBook Pro and any peripherals I'll want to hang on the back. The top part of this mount will later be used to support the entire weight of the TV via a 13-foot section of aluminum speed rail, but for now, it will be used as camera support. For this build, I went with the Sony ZV-E1. For one, it's the smallest full-frame alpha camera out there, but secondly, it has USB-C tethering as a webcam, so that means I only have to run one cable into my computer.
My new super minimalist setup. You don't even see the computer, do you? Hit me. Woo! That's good. I don't want to go too much. You don't want to do too much, you know what I mean? This is moving so much. I should not be doing this. This is a bad idea. Bad idea. All right, we'll go one more time. What do you think about my new live stream setup? It's pretty rad, right? All right. With this giant television, I can see the entire timeline. This is the way.
Now, it did take a few days for my brain to adjust editing on it, but being able to see all the visuals upscaled on Sony's new XR processor, it's definitely a luxury I got used to. But let's get real, I don't need 50 applications open at once when editing, and the BRAVIA 55-inch screen has the same color science as the 98, so I think I'll stick with that.
Woo! We didn't break it.
Though, for virtual production, we must go bigger. One of my favorite quotes that comes to mind is, just because something can be done doesn't mean it should be done. And I say, it definitely should be done. Now, we know the Orbit can hold my body weight. That's not the question. The question is, how much more can it hold?
All right. By the way, the Orbit is not rated to hold anywhere near close to this. Had to take apart the motor here and make sure that it was welded all the way through so that the motor wouldn't just shred when there's like 300 pounds on it.
So the stock Orbit is rated to hold about 15 pounds on each side. That's enough to hold most cameras and equal in counterweight. But most of this rating is based on the stock arms and accessories, not the actual motor. If we use a cinema arm attachment, you can slide speed rail through the Orbit and that payload increases considerably. But the most I've tested on the actual motor is close to 200 pounds. And while that worked fine, we need to increase it by 50%.
All of that work just so I could look at one thing. See that? Needed to make sure that was welded all the way around. This is good.
So now that we know the motor won't rip apart and kill me, we'll need to distribute the axial load and give more strength to our aluminum speed rail. And this is where the block bearing comes in handy. The cinema arm attachment comes with a block bearing and 2 collar sleeves to attach to either end of the speed rail. And if we add ratchet straps to the mix, boom, now we got a spinning truss. Now, I extensively tested this last year with the outdoor Orbit and 30-foot Orbit wingspan, and it works. It works well by straightening the Orbit out. But I've never attempted to put this much weight on there before. Let me be clear, this is f***ing stupid.
I mean, if the top comes down. Normally on the Orbit, you have the camera on one side and then you have a counterweight on the other side. But in this case, the television is 150 pounds and it is the counterweight. So we're gonna have to counterweight the camera side now. Check out the counterweight.
So once again, the Power Station 1000 comes in clutch here. I'm going to clamp it to the camera side. It's gonna give us about 30 pounds of weight. So we're gonna need to add some extra sandbags to go the rest of the way.
The TV almost fills the entire frame at 24 millimeters.
Now, the first thing we need to do is shoot a plate. Now, we can either shoot a plate using a time-lapse motor or an Orbit, or we can build a plate in Unreal Engine or Blender. And this part is definitely a little tricky, so special thanks to my friend Honor, who built this virtual Orbit rig in Unreal Engine. The results looked a lot better than I was expecting. Now, in order for this to work for volume playback, the field of view, focus, and orbit speed of these plates need to match the A-cam. For example, this plate won't work too well because the focus is rendered out at infinity, and it won't make much sense if both I and this background are in sharp focus on the final mix. If I were to do it again, I would soften this a bit. Another issue to address is the frame rate of the plates need to be played back at a higher frame rate than what the principal camera is recording, so that the motion is smooth and there's no possible frame jumps. You can see this here on this plate that was shot and played back at 24 frames per second. I learned this too late, after I already hung the damn TV.
We have our regular camera here set to 50 millimeters. We're gonna shoot it at a higher frame rate. We're gonna shoot it at 60 frames per second because we're gonna play it back at 60. Then when we reshoot it this way, we're gonna be reshooting it at 24. So we should have more than enough frames. That makes sense to me. Does it make sense to you?
Now's a good time to mention the BRAVIA TV comes with AirPlay, and it does work well for most circumstances, but for this setup, streaming 4K 60 frames per second with minimal compression, I will need to use something else, like a small media player to hook into the 4K 120 Hz HDMI port in the back. You need 120 Hz in order to play back 60 frames per second footage.
God, this is so trippy looking at it in real life because when I look at it, the television's moving, but the image is staying the same. What the hell?
Now, this may look like a parlor trick, but this is actually a great test. Shoot a plate of a room and then screen it back in that same exact room. This way, you can see if the effect will work under the same exact lighting conditions.
So I'm in my studio, but I'm also in my studio. Now what's crazy is I could actually replace the background with any number of locations.
This is actually a Kickstarter backer's bedroom. I put a blast out to several Orbit owners to send me plates. I like this
on
one.
a nice big screen. I will say this is probably the biggest screen that you want to be editing on. Anything bigger than this is just a little bit unnecessary in my opinion.
The critic in my brain says, why go through all this? Why hang a TV when you could have a much easier time hanging a portable green screen? And I think this episode is more of a proof of concept that maybe moving a volume along with a camera could be useful in some situations where building a super large volume is just infeasible. Now, the trickiest thing I've yet to overcome is the reflections on the screen. Now, this Sony television is already a matte finish, so reflections are minimized, but they're not zero. The only way to zero them out is to black out and try to rebuild the lights.
I definitely need some more lighting.
So now that everything's blacked out and using an Unreal Engine plate that's constructed with similar single source top lighting, we can start to see how this might actually work. Now I did try a polarizer on the lens and that did jack shit. But would a large sheet of polarizing film on the TV work? This is probably the best it's going to get without some, what the?
Okay, so just in case it wasn't clear enough that this is a bad idea, I just heard a crack. The center pole where I had welded it like a couple of years ago when I didn't know what I was doing, I don't think I welded it all the way through. I think I just tack welded it. It is just hanging on by like a little tiny piece of metal.
Yeah, you can see right through it. That's the only thing holding this up right now.
What if the way to make a more convincing, budget-friendly virtual production studio is to move the screen and the camera? Is this game-changing or just a parlor trick? Probably the latter, but I feel like for the first time since doing virtual production elements at home, it's starting to look more real.
My God, this thing, definitely don't do this Orbit with this load. It's like too much of a pain in the butt to take it all down only to fix the pole, so I'm gonna try to fix it while it's still hanging.
So this isn't me throwing in the towel. This is me saying, there's something here. I have a few new ideas and a few problems to solve. Thank you, Sony, for believing in this project, and to be continued. As for the TV, it's going back on the wall. My wife will be thrilled. See you on the next one.
The plan is to very carefully enclose it with some very strong pipe clamps and then put some bolts through it once that's secure.